Some nights feel different before anything even happens. The air is thicker, the silence too heavy, the weight of something unseen pressing against your skin. That night, I should have known. I should have felt it creeping in, waiting just beyond my understanding. But I didn't. And by the time I realized, it was already too late. The house was quiet. My mother was out of town, leaving just me and my stepfather under the same roof. It wasn't unusual. We had spent plenty of nights alone before, but something about this one felt different. The stillness wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. I had spent most of the evening in my room, curled up under my blankets, lost in a book I wasn't really reading. My mind kept drifting, unsettled by something I couldn't name. Maybe it was the way the house felt larger, emptier. Maybe it was the way I caught myself listening, expecting to hear something that never came. Then, just as I was starting to relax, I heard footsteps. Slow, measured, moving down the hallway. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. The footsteps stopped just outside my door. A knock followed, soft, hesitant. I hesitated too, my fingers tightening around the edge of my blanket. It was late. Too late for casual conversation. "Come in," I called, my voice barely above a whisper. The door creaked open, and there he was. My stepfather stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Something about the way he looked at me sent a chill through my spine. "Hey, can I come in?" His voice was lower than usual, almost cautious. That alone was enough to put me on edge. He had never asked before. He had always just walked in, never thinking twice about it. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, sure." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I watched as he ran a hand through his hair, exhaling heavily. He looked different, less composed than usual, his posture tense, his shoulders tight. Like something was weighing on him. I sat up straighter. "Is something wrong?" He let out a slow breath. "I need to ask you something." A strange feeling settled in my stomach. "Okay." He hesitated, his fingers flexing at his sides. Then, "Promise me you won't freak out." My pulse quickened. That was never a good way to start a conversation. I swallowed hard. "That depends on what you're about to say." His jaw tightened slightly, as if he was debating whether to continue. Then, finally, "I need your help with something. And I don't know who else to ask." His words sent a ripple of confusion through me. I frowned, shifting in my seat. "Help with what?" He looked away for a moment, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's complicated." A chill ran through me. I didn't like the way he said that. I folded my arms, trying to steady myself. "Just say it." He inhaled deeply, as if gathering his thoughts. Then, finally, he met my gaze. "I trust you. And I need to know that I can, no matter what." The way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. There was something raw in his voice, something heavy with meaning. My breath caught. "Of course you can trust me. But you're freaking me out a little." He let out a small, humorless chuckle. "Yeah, I figured." The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. He looked like he wanted to say something more, but for some reason, he couldn't bring himself to. I leaned forward slightly, my voice softer now. "Just tell me." He exhaled sharply. "It's about something I've been keeping from you. From everyone." My stomach twisted. "Keeping what?" His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw something I wasn't sure I was ready to name. The truth. The air left my lungs. I didn't know what that meant. Not yet. But deep down, I knew one thing for certain. This was the moment everything changed. And I wasn't ready for what came next. The weight of his words sat heavy between us, thickening the air in the room. The truth. I swallowed hard, my fingers gripping the edge of my blanket. My heartbeat pounded against my ribs, my mind scrambling to understand what he meant. "What truth?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling sharply. "I don't even know where to start." "Start anywhere." He hesitated, his jaw tightening. Then, finally, "I've been keeping something from you. And I don't know how much longer I can." My stomach twisted. "You're scaring me." His lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but instead, he looked away, his shoulders tense. "I know. And I'm sorry. The silence between us stretched unbearably long. I could feel the shift happening in real time, the invisible line between what was normal and whatever this was beginning to blur. Finally, I forced my voice to steady. Just tell me. He met my gaze, his eyes unreadable. I need you to trust me. I frowned. I do. No, I mean really trust me. His voice was firm, measured, but beneath it, there was something else. Something raw. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering in my ears. Why wouldn't I? He let out a humorless chuckle, shaking his head. Because once I say this, I don't know if things will ever be the same. The weight of his words sent a shiver through me. I could feel the moment dragging me forward, pulling me toward something I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. But there was no turning back now. I steeled myself. Say it. He hesitated for only a second before finally speaking. I need your help. The breath left my lungs. That wasn't what I had expected. I sat up straighter. With what? His fingers curled into fists at his sides before he finally looked away. Something I can't do alone. A strange kind of relief mixed with unease settled over me. I had braced myself for something worse. But there was still a heaviness in his voice, something that told me whatever this was, it mattered. I licked my lips. Then tell me how. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. Just promise me you won't ask too many questions. That made my stomach twist. I don't like the sound of that. His lips pressed into a tight line. I know. But if you trust me, just this once, I need you to listen. Another silence stretched between us. Then, finally, I nodded. Okay. Something in his expression softened. He let out a breath, his posture relaxing just slightly. Thank you. It was such a simple response, but there was something in it, something that felt final. I waited for him to elaborate, to explain, to give me something more. But he didn't. He just stood there, watching me, as if waiting for me to change my mind. The silence between us stretched too long. I cleared my throat. Are you going to tell me what this is about? He hesitated. Not tonight. Frustration bubbled inside me. Then why bring it up at all? Because I needed you to know I trust you. And that I need you to trust me too. That answer didn't sit right with me. It felt incomplete. I folded my arms. You're keeping something from me. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. It's complicated. More than you think. Try me. For a moment, I thought he would. But then, he shook his head. Not yet. Disappointment settled in my chest. He had come to my room, shaken, unsettled, as if he had something urgent to tell me. But now, he was backing away from it. I watched as he stepped toward the door, his movements slower, like he was hesitant to leave. Good night. I opened my mouth, wanting to demand more, to press him for answers. But nothing came out. I just nodded. Good night. The door clicked shut behind him, and I sat there, staring at the space he had just occupied, my thoughts spinning. This wasn't over. Whatever this was, whatever he was hiding. It was just beginning. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next.